Hari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Giridvaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Sodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Panachari. Yamunatira Panachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Ballabha Giridvaradhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Shiva. Bhagavatam Sabhadanajikacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnu Bhagavatam Sabhadanajikacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This first day of the International Leadership Gathering, we're focusing upon Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, Chapter 5, Text 4. Yad Vijnano Yad Adaro Yad Parastvam Yad Atmakaha Ekastridasi Bhutani Bhutaivatma Mayaya Yad Vijnano Yad Adharo Yad Parastvam Yad Atmakaha Ekastridasi Bhutani Bhutaivatma Mayaya Yad Vijnano Yad Adharo Yad Parastvam Yad Atmaka Ekastridasi Bhutani Bhutaivatma Mayaya Vaishnavis. Yat Vijnana, the source of knowledge. Yat Adhara, under whose protection. Yat Para, under whose subordination. Tvam, you. Yat Atmaka, in what capacity? Eka, alone. Srijasi, you are creating. Bhutani, the living entities. Bhutai, with the help of the material elements. Eva, certainly. Atma, self. Maya, by potency. Translation. This is Narada Muni speaking to Lord Brahma. My dear Father, what is the source of your knowledge? Under whose protection are you standing? And under whom are you working? What is your real position? Do you alone create all entities with material elements by your personal energy? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It was known to Sri Narada Muni that Lord Brahma attained creative energy by undergoing severe austerities. As such, he could understand that there was someone else superior to Brahmaji, who invested Brahma with the power of creation. Therefore, he asked all the above questions. Discoveries of progressive scientific achievements are therefore not independent. The scientist has to attain the knowledge of a thing already existing by means of the wonderful brain made by someone else. A scientist can work with the help of such an awarded brain, but it is not possible for the scientist to create his own or a similar brain. Therefore, no one is independent in the matter of any creation, nor is such creation automatic. Translation again. My dear Father, what is the source of your knowledge? Under whose protection are you standing? And under whom are you working? What is your real position? Do you alone create all entities with material elements by your personal energy? Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. These questions by Narada Muni to Lord Brahma are a wonderful way to begin this gathering, because Narada Muni is going beyond what is ordinarily apparent. He's looking at the big picture and trying to understand. Now you can look at this section of the Bhagavatam in two ways. That number one, Narada Muni is suspecting that there's someone else, there's someone who's superior to Brahma. On the other hand, you can look at it, and you'll find this in Prabhupada's commentary as well as that of the Acharyas. Narada Muni, by the will of the Lord, was bewildered. He's basically asking 10 questions about the universe, the cosmic manifestation, and Brahma's relationship to it. And then he finally gets to the point of, okay, the universe is one thing, but I want to know about you, Brahma, my father. Are you the ultimate? So in a few verses later, Prabhupada explains that by the will of the Lord, Narada Muni was bewildered at first. He may have suspected there could be something else, but at first he's overwhelmed by the extraordinary power of Brahma. Just as by the will of the Lord, Arjuna was bewildered in Bhagavad Gita. as you know from your readings of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna apparently was on the bodily platform, although a very refined bodily platform. He was feeling attachment for his relations, whereas Krishna wanted Arjuna to focus on Krishna's order in their spiritual relationship. You'll find that Lord Brahma concedes a point to Narada Muni. He says, by thinking I am the supreme, you're actually right, when considered from that point of view. Anyone looking at me would naturally make the mistake of thinking that I am the ultimate. In other words, I can understand your thinking process. Then Lord Brahma says, I've been inspired to see into the creative potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose will the creation originates. So Lord Brahma, and we can take heed of this for our gathering, Lord Brahma is first stressing inspiration. I've been inspired to see into what's really going on. And then he begins to discuss organization. Just like Srila Prabhupada once commented that first is preaching, and then the management follows the preaching like a shadow. So first Brahma is stressing inspiration, because without inspiration, how is anything in our society of devotees going to go on? We're very fortunate to have this gathering, and during the years of COVID separation, we've developed, perhaps we've forgotten how wonderful it is just to mingle with devotees and talk. I know in my own case, having spent a few years locked down in a part of the world that had its lockdown restrictions only exceeded by China, and month after month, year after year of the mobile phone sounding off because of a government alarm, attention, attention, COVID detected in the city, 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, no movement anywhere. This went on, and then off, reduced a bit, and then on. Now, you may say, well, in that particular part of the world, there were no deaths of devotees and no serious illness. But we're noticing that the psychological toll was very great. And the divisiveness amongst the devotees was substantial, diminished now. Vaccine, no vaccine, conspiracy, no conspiracy. So the physical challenges were less, but the psychological challenges were more. And by coming here to a gathering like this, whether we're coming from a part of the world where the lockdown restrictions weren't so tough, stringent, or from a part of the world where they were indeed ongoing, month after month, year after year, we can now relish satam sasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti hikarna rasayana kata. When the devotees gather together for glorifying Krishna, the taste, the sweetness increases, the power of the talks increases. And what is this glorification of Krishna? What is this kirtan? Kirtan doesn't simply mean music. It also means talking about Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada said, it also means discussing the illusions and pitfalls and debacles, disasters caused by the illusory energy. said, that is also kirtan, and unless devotees hear that kind of talk, they'll grow weak and go away. He gave a very pungent example about the glories of material existence. And that's when he said, this is also kirtan. So, yes, we have in mind for you some reality checks. But first, let's continue with Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. Narada Muni is not foolish enough to think that there are just laws that make material cosmos work. He understands that laws by themselves are just descriptions of observations of patterns in nature. Laws don't make things happen. They're not causal. Only a fool would think that. Laws have some causative power of agency. As we all know, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate satcharacharam. By his direction, material nature is operating. He doesn't get personally involved in the ongoing interactions of material nature, except for his devotees. That is when Krishna intervenes and does things personally. Otherwise, natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. He's got nothing to do. He's got no goals to achieve. As Queen Kunti says, how is it that the unborn seems to take birth? How is it that one who is inactive seems to act? And then he appears among sages, rishis, aquatics, animals, taking their form. How can this be? This is all bewildering to me. Speaking of bewilderment, Lord Brahma will get his share of it. In the 13th chapter of the 10th canto. By the way, a majestic, astonishing chapter with its Bhaktivedanta purport spoken in Prabhupada's last days among us. And I remember at the BBT receiving the manuscript from Vrindavan of the 13th chapter. And of course, before putting it into production, I read it. And I couldn't believe it. How can someone write in such a way, speak in such a way, in such a critical condition? The purports have a charm and expansiveness of their own. At the same time, I have to confess, reading it midway, I began to cry because I had the realization that this will be the last chapter of the Bhaktivedanta purports. And yes, 2 days later, the news came that Prabhupada had left the ordinary vision of this world. So the chapter begins with Brahma's being astonished. He had just seen Aghasura being terminated. He and the Devatas were amazed. But then something happened that amazed them even more. The lunch scene on the bank of the Yamuna, Krishna and the cowherd boys. Remember how Krishna pointed out that this is the perfect place for our pastimes. The sand is soft. The leaves are whispering in the trees. The birds are chirping. The bees are humming. There's a sweet fragrance of lotus flowers in the air. Nearby is grass for the calves to eat. My dear friends, let us sit here and have lunch. Everyone is hungry because the Aghasura termination delayed lunch a bit. So the cowherd boys delighted in being inventive, gathering various materials for putting their lunch on. Leaves, rocks, whatever. And they surrounded Krishna. Krishna had already told them, this is a great place, not only for eating, but also for fighting. Mock fighting. But now we're going to eat. And everyone pulled out their lunches. And of course, they're offering the lunches to one another. Taste what comes from my home, especially offering to Krishna. And sometimes the cowherd boys would wrap a flower into some food item and offer that food item to one of their mates. And the cowherd boy receiving would put that in his mouth, thinking to savor the tasty food, and after a while, of course, taste the bitter flour and make all kinds of faces. And then the cowherd boys would jump the one who did this, the one who gave the flour hidden in the food. And they would have a play fight. So they're all looking at Krishna, thinking Krishna is looking directly at me more than anyone else. They're all thinking everyone else has their back to Krishna or their side to Krishna, but I have the full-on vision of Krishna. This is Krishna's mystic power. Then, as you know, the calves happened to wander away. Some say they were just hungry for more grass. They were greedy. Others say Brahma allured them away, knowing that he couldn't take them directly. First, he had to attract them away from Krishna. Why did Brahma do this? There are various angles of his bewilderment, the Brahma Vimohana Leela. Some say, and when I say some say, I mean acharyas, that Brahma just wanted to have fun. Let me see what happens if I do this. Others say that Brahma was wanting to test, is this really my worshipable Lord, Krishna? The whole lunch pastime bewildered not only Brahma, but the devatas who are watching also, because they know usually the Supreme Personality of Godhead only eats through the sacrificial fire. That's according to the awe and reverence relationship that the devatas have. He's Yagya Bhuk. But look at this lunch scene. Is this for real? This is inconceivable. The casualness, the playing around, the quarreling, the chit-chatting, Krishna sometimes chastising. There's Krishna sitting with his flute on the right side tucked in to his cloth, and his cowherd stick on the other side tucked in, as well as his bugle. So that Lord Brahma doesn't know what to make of this. At the same time, he wants to have some fun. I've got power. I've got mystic power. Let's see what Krishna can do. I'm going to take away the calves and the cowherd boys. What will be Krishna's response? Will Krishna come to me and beg for the calves and cowherd boys back? What will he do? This is Krishna's personal intervention. Mayajaksena prakriti suyajeta characharam. That applies to the ordinary goings of material nature. But for his devotee, Krishna can personally intervene, and this is what he did to bewilder Brahma. So the cowherd boys notice the calves have gone far away. Krishna says, stay right here. I'll be sad if you interrupt this lunch pastime and run off after the calves. Don't worry, I'll go get them. This is Krishna, always thinking, of the satisfaction of his devotees. So you know what then happened. So much transpired. We'll jump to the end, where Brahma ends up showing Anubhava, outward displays of ecstatic love. He's at Krishna's feet. All four heads are touching Krishna's feet. He's bathing Krishna's feet with his tears. And then, because he descended from his swan carrier and fell down at Krishna's feet. And then Brahma would rise up because he wanted to see the face of Krishna. And then he'd be overwhelmed by Krishna's greatness. He'd fall down at Krishna's feet again. This went on and on, rising, falling, the face, the feet, the face, the feet. His mystic power was so tiny compared to what Krishna had done. So this is the Brahma that Narada Muni is inquiring from. Narada Muni purposely, by the Lord's purpose that is, has been overcome by thinking, what I see immediately, that is the reality. The purpose of our gathering here is extraordinarily important, especially at this time of human existence. Our theme is unity and diversity. That means we need to focus on how not to be overpowered by the diversity, and we should search for the unity, just like Narada Muni is searching for who is actually behind all this. I'm overpowered by what's immediately before my eyes, but I suspect there's something more. So this festival is for finding out, rediscovering, realigning ourselves with the unity and diversity principle. We're in a different world now than 50 years ago. This year, many of you know that India will become the most populous country in the world. Ever since 1950, China has always been known as the nation with the greatest population. But this year, India, which has added, since 1950, added 1 billion persons, this year India will be the most populated. And the amazing thing for outreach is that 40% of the Indian population is under the age of 25. Ooh. That makes any youth preacher just drool. But we should remember that we have the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We're all related. Somehow we should strengthen our connection. We have a little bit of perhaps skepticism toward global unity because it's been such a failure in the material world. The material world, generally, roughly speaking, you could say, has been divided into two camps. Of course, there's a middle ground, but there are two poles, like north-south pole. The globalists and the nationalists. Sometimes the nationalists are known as the territorialists. The globalists say, and it's, by the way, the globalists are on the bodily platform also because they see all human beings as one, but they don't care about the other species, generally speaking. Although concern for the other species is starting to arise, but for so long, globalism focuses on the human beings. We want no walls, no barriers, no religion, nothing to divide us, just humanity. And then you have the nationalists, also known as the territorialists. This is My land. This is our land. We have our flag. We have our constitution. We have our group, and you are the other group. So the nationalists or the territorialists feel that globalism has ignored something so crucial. The feeling of strength you get from body identification. I am of this type, and you are of the other type of body. That gives you something, gives you some purpose in life. Yes, I am this type of body, and it gives you someone to put down. You are of the other type. So the nationalists, they feel that without that strength of body identification, distinguishing one human body from another, how can there be harmony? How can there be unity? So this is the best that the world has to offer. Either you're a globalist and you stress human bodies and you don't know what to do with the other species of life, or you're a nationalist in which you stress your creed, your color, your culture, my country. We don't want to fall under that influence. And I'll speak briefly about where that influence has led. And this is something that happened just this week. Srila Prabhupada built India, the Indian Yatra, with international resources. I can tell you from personal experience that I was a young Sankirtan devotee in New York, and we were selling books and taking in funds non-stop with the hope of purchasing a better building in New York. Non-stop meant at least 6.5 days of the week, morning till night, in blazing hot summer in New York City, freezing winter, above ground, underground in the subways. Sometimes on weekends, we'd start distributing at 9 a.m., finish at 9 p.m. when the shopping centers close, and then go to big concert arenas full of 25,000 young people and distribute until 1 in the morning, get back to the temple, and it's almost Mangal Arti time. No point in going to sleep. And then ask the temple president after Mangal Arti, can we rest for 2 hours before we go out again at 9 o'clock? We can't miss the morning program. So. Very austere. Meanwhile, in Juhu, the original devotees that Prabhupada brought to India from the US and the UK, they're performing severe austerities there. So this next item is something I witnessed personally because I had the service in Los Angeles at the BBT of filing all Prabhupada's correspondence, both from him and to him. So we had collected in New York City, this is before I went to Los Angeles, we had collected about $100,000, which was back then in 1974, that was a lot of money. Equivalent, you could say, to $1 million US. So we were in the money. We were going to get that building in New York. All our austerities of 7-day-a-week Sankirtan had accumulated. So then, the money disappeared. And we didn't know what happened. The ordinary devotees didn't know what happened. We wondered, did someone embezzle the funds? What happened? Then when I got to LA, I saw a letter from Prabhupada to the temple president, and I saw what happened. Prabhupada wrote the temple president of New York, I hear that you've collected $100,000 for your new building. Very good. Remember, 100,000 is about 1 million these days. Wonderful. Can you loan Juhu that money? Because we want to solidify this whole Juhu endeavor. Please, for a few months, lend Juhu the $100,000. Think $1 million. So the temple president wrote back, I saw, sure, Prabhupada, we'll be glad to loan that money. Then a few months later, the temple president had written Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, except our obeisances at your lotus feet. We'd like that loan back that you mentioned because we want to buy the building in New York. And I was shocked to see Prabhupada's response. What? You have given and now you want back? True story. There have been so many instances this year of you're seeing the glories of international cooperation. The North American leaders raised over $100,000 to send to devotees in Ukraine who were suffering with no heat, no electricity, no water. Forget the geopolitics. We're just talking about devotee care, okay? We're not indulging in partisan politics here. Look at the book distribution. And you'll hear that in the plenary session at 10 o'clock today. Vaisheshika Prabhu described the international harmony of distributing Prabhupada's books. Their goal was, for 1 year, 3 million Bhagavad Gitas. They smashed the goal and sold 3.5 million Bhagavad Gitas. They exceeded their goals for set distribution. 46,000 sets were distributed. This is all the work of transcendental internationalism. And that is what is needed today, because one part of the world may need funds for devotees just to survive. Another part of the world, just like Prabhupada's birthplace, that property in Calcutta, Australia and New Zealand did their best to contribute money for that project in Calcutta. We could, and I say we because I'm a multinational, I'm also a New Zealand citizen, so we could have said, India is loaded with money, not Indian Yatra. We're not sending anything. But Prabhupada's birthplace transcends all such thinking, and so devotees rallied and sent money to Calcutta. Often it's said there's enough money in Calcutta alone to build the TOVB. Hint. So New Zealand and Australia sent money for Prabhupada's birthplace. So this shows you the glories of working together. And we're going to have to work together because just this Monday, the past Monday, the UN Secretary General spoke about the horrifying facts. Many of you have heard of the doomsday clock. How many? Any? Very few. This is a clock. It's a metaphorical clock devised by the world's preeminent foreign policy experts, military experts, security experts, scientific experts. Every year they devise a clock. And midnight means human annihilation. And so for years, this clock metaphor started right after World War II. Scientists like Albert Einstein and others who had input in the first atomic bomb, they were very concerned. how is humanity going to go on? So they devised this clock. And for 75 years, this clock has been created yearly. The closest that the clock came to midnight was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The farthest away from midnight was 17 minutes. Now, the illustrious panel of experts informed the UN Secretary General, we're at 90 seconds before midnight. This has been the closest ever to human global catastrophe. So you might say, well, why now? There were nuclear weapons in the past. There are 1/4 the number of nuclear weapons existing on Earth now as there were in 1980. Still, we're 90 seconds away from mass annihilation. What's the difference? The UN Secretary General explained, as well as this illustrious panel of scientists and experts called the Science and Security Board, they explained, although the Cuban Missile Crisis was one hair breadth away from mass destruction, there were institutions to try and manage it. There was dialogue that somehow they kept the lid on the pot. Barely, but still the lid stayed on the pot. Now, these experts say, in such crises as we have today, the international cooperation and the international frameworks are gone, and therefore 90 seconds before midnight. So anyone can see who does an analysis. Just like in the UK, you have the Oxford Center for the Future of Humanity Studies. And in Cambridge, you have the Center for the Study of Existential Risks. It's the latest thing now to doubt whether humanity can survive. Let's just take a limited, from the global point of view, nuclear exchange between India and, the other country. Each of them has about 150 nuclear weapons. Physicists have calculated, if each side just fires 50 of those Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs, and those Hiroshima size means firecracker compared to what everyone else has got. If just 50 out of their arsenal, each one has 150, are fired at the mega cities in that country and this country, you will see climate havoc like never experienced before. Many of you may remember back in the 80s, there was talk about nuclear winter. Anyone remember that? What happens when a volcano explodes? A major volcanic explosion in the Philippines brought down the global temperature average by 1 degree Celsius. Because what happens is all the debris and smoke goes up into the air and blocks the upper atmosphere so that the sunlight doesn't come through, and that chills the earth. So scientists back in the 1980s calculated that a major nuclear war between you-know-who, the two major nuclear powers, and by the way, there are 9 nuclear powers in the world today, just those two going at each other would create such havoc that all the debris and smoke going up into the air would blot out the sun, and there would be human extinction, because the living would envy the dead, they said. That was 1980. By 1990, in typical scientific fashion, they backtracked a bit. Well, it won't be that bad. Instead of nuclear winter, it'll be nuclear autumn. They explained that the basic physics was correct, but the outcome had been a bit exaggerated. What's the current analysis? Any talk of human extinction is exaggerated. There'll be nuclear autumn, and that means the end of human civilization as we know it. So instead of extinction, there's just the end of human civilization as we know. So this is what midnight is in terms of the doomsday clock, which tracks human-made threats. Since 2007, the doomsday clock has taken into account not just nuclear warfare, but climate change. What does all this have to do with our gathering today? What other solution do you see in the world other than the spiritual solution? The spiritual solution means knowledge, knowledgeable servitors working together to carry out the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, focusing on what our Father, just like Narada is focusing on the Father, Brahma, we're focusing on Srila Prabhupada's amazing request that we globally cooperate. Our leaders, when I say our leaders, I mean material leaders. They're totally bewildered, and it's not like Lord Brahma's bewilderment. Yadubar Prabhu was telling me that Prabhupada called him over once and said to him, if you really knew how bad your political leaders are, and just left it at that, if you only understood how bad your leaders are in material society, we think that they must have some rationality. They must know what they're doing. Forget it. And this is the latest realization. And just this past Monday, the UN General Secretary has said, we're at the brink of global catastrophe. The doomsday clock has never before been this close to midnight, which indicates complete annihilation. So what can the little Hare Krishnas do about this? Remember in the 10th Canto Purport, Prabhupada wrote that through this Krishna consciousness movement, all the demoniac influences will be counteracted. How that will happen, you can't understand now. So the UN General Secretary is talking about humanity's darkest hours upon us. Prabhupada said that historians will note the time when he was present with us as the beginning of what saved humanity in its darkest hour. So this is the kind of burden, transcendental burden we're carrying, and we need everyone's focus on how to, with our diversity, how to see the unity. And that's why this particular gathering this year is extraordinarily important. We're at the most crucial time of history, recent human history. All kinds of crises are converging at once. Nuclear weaponry, climate change, economic collapse, institutional failure, both globally and nationally. More than ever, the devotees of Krishna are needed. I could go on for another hour about this, but one last example. Banasura. Strange psychology, very appropriate for today in our analyses. Banasura, you know, with the 1,000 arms, he was benedicted by Lord Shiva. He didn't know what to do with those arms. He said, I've got an itch in all my 1,000 arms. I can't find any satisfaction to get rid of this itch. I smash mountains with my arms. And Lord Shiva told him, because Banasura was implying, I've got no one to fight. I can't fight elephants. They run away from me. Maybe I should fight you. And Lord Shiva, the Acharya say, is thinking, maybe I should kill you. But Lord Shiva has his compassionate side. So he told him, one day you'll meet an opponent who will devastate you. And Banasura is so happy. And it's a strange psychology that Prabhupada elaborates on in Krishna book. Banasura is thinking, I'll be able to expend my destructive potencies. He's not thinking he's going to lose and be destroyed. He's thinking, at last I'll be able to just express myself and just smash and be smashed, and it's going to be great. Guess what? These are the kind of leaders you have. Remember the leader of the neighboring country who said, the people can go hungry and eat grass, but we will have the bomb. I've read reports from pilots of strategic bombers who were scrambled in the air because of a false alarm, it turned out. And when they got near the Arctic Circle, the point of no return, they got the message, false alarm, turn back. You know what they said? That was the saddest day in my life. Because they're so primed to go, 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 destroy, destroy. And they, never mind that I'm going to die. I get to, like Banasura, I get to just unleash such destructive potential. It's kind of a fascination. So these are the kind of leaders you have. In order to deal with this unprecedented human crisis, although we Hare Krishnas seem to be so small, we need to work together. It takes some austerity, it takes some focus, but it can be done, and we're seeing examples of that. International cooperation will be needed in so many ways in the coming years as natural catastrophes increase, as political systems break down. Here's a plug for farms. You don't want to go hungry. Take care of your ISKCON farms. Farm doesn't mean simply rural residential community. It means places that grow food. We're going to need all these elements. This country is affected by military conflict. That country is affected by, like Australia, wildfires, and New Zealand, floods, and on and on it will go. The only way we can cope with this as a society of devotees is to be our brother and sister's keeper. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.